The lawyer said it was worth almost nothing, but her uncle left it to her on purpose, and she had to find out why. Past the dead compressors and 20 years of dust, she found a wall that wasn't on any blueprint, and behind it, a steel door. Nora Kellum's hand hovered 3 inches from a steel door at the back of a cold storage facility she'd never seen before, in a town she barely remembered, left to her by a man she'd met exactly twice. Her fingers were cold. The brass compass on its braided leather cord had slipped free of her thermal and hung forward from her neck, swinging slightly, catching the last gray light of a Maine afternoon. She hadn't opened the door yet, but we're getting ahead of ourselves. Rewind 2 weeks. 2 weeks earlier, Nora was standing behind the register at a Texaco on Route 1 outside Bath, Maine, scanning a 12-pack of Bud Light for a guy who wouldn't look her in the eye when her phone buzzed in her back pocket. She let it go. Phones buzzing meant nothing good. A landlord, a past due notice, a wrong number. The only people who called Nora Kellum were people who wanted something from her, and she had nothing to give. She had $211, $14 in her checking account. She knew the number to the penny because when you're that close to zero, you do the math every single day. Rent on the room above the laundromat on Cedar Street was $375, due in 9 days. Gas to get to work and back ran about $38 a week. Food was ramen at $1.89 a pack, twice a day, which came to $26.46 a week if she didn't eat anything else, and she usually didn't. You do that arithmetic enough times, the answer stops surprising you. It just sits there like a stone in your shoe. She was 22 years old, aged out of foster care at 18 with $43 in an envelope and a green duffel bag that held everything she owned. 4 years later, the duffel was the same one. The $43 had become $211, $14, which, if you think about it, is not a lot of progress for 4 years of showing up on time and never calling in sick. The only thing she carried from before the foster homes, before the group home in Bangor, before the entire system that was supposed to catch her and didn't, was the compass. Dented brass, old, the glass scratched but not cracked, on a braided leather cord her mother had tied herself. That's what they told her anyway. Her mother had died when Nora was 3. The compass was in the duffel bag pocket when she aged out. Nobody explained where it came from. Nobody explained much of anything. The phone buzzed again an hour later. She checked it on her break, leaning against the ice machine out back, loose strands of dark, honey-blonde hair stuck to her forehead from the heat of the fryer inside. A voicemail from a number she didn't recognize. A man's voice, precise and unhurried, like he'd left this kind of message before. "Ms. Kellum, my name is Haskell. I'm an attorney in Harwick, Maine. I'm calling to inform you that your uncle, Martin Kellum, passed away on the 14th. He has named you as sole beneficiary of his estate. I'd appreciate a call back at your earliest convenience." Nora played it twice. Then she put the phone in her pocket and went back to the register. Here's what she knew about Martin Kellum. Almost nothing. Her mother's brother. She'd met him twice, both times before she was 6, both times in rooms that smelled like engine oil and cold concrete. A quiet man with rough hands who spoke to her like she was a real person, which, when you're 5, you notice. After her mother died, Martin disappeared from her life completely. The foster care paperwork listed no family willing to assume custody. She was told, by caseworkers, by one foster mother who said it like she was doing Nora a favor, that he didn't want contact, that he'd made that clear, that she should stop asking. So she stopped asking. She called Haskell back the next morning from the parking lot of the Texaco, engine off, heat already fading from the Civic's vents. He explained it plainly. Martin Kellum had died alone in his house in Harwick. No spouse, no children. He'd left Nora a cold storage facility on the eastern edge of town, off Route 9. A low, cinder block building on a gravel lot. Assessed value? $14,000. Back taxes owed? $3,200. Haskell would mail a key and the paperwork. He was sorry for her loss. Nora sat in the car for a long time after that call. The math didn't take long. She couldn't afford the taxes. She couldn't afford the gas to drive there and back. She couldn't afford to miss a shift. She almost didn't go. Her boss, a man named Gary who had never once asked her a personal question in 2 years, looked at her face when she came in that afternoon and said, "Take Thursday and Friday. Go handle your business." Didn't ask why, didn't dock her hours, just said it and walked into the back. Thursday morning, she drove east, 94 miles in a 2004 Honda Civic with 237,000 miles on it, burning oil badly enough that the exhaust left a blue haze behind her on the highway. The heat worked intermittently, 10 minutes on, 20 minutes off, and the temperature outside was 31 degrees. She drove with her hands tucked into the sleeves of the olive green canvas jacket, steering with her wrists, the compass resting against her sternum under the faded black thermal. The towns she passed through were more memory than economy. Boarded storefronts with sun-bleached "for lease" signs nobody was going to answer. A diner with 4 trucks in the lot. A post office with a handwritten sign in the window, "Open Munwed Friday." A hardware store. A church. Another church. Gas stations that used to be something else. Harwick wasn't different. It was just further along. She found Route 9 by instinct more than signage. The cold storage sat behind a gravel lot with no sign, no name, nothing to tell you what it was or who it belonged to. A low, cinder block building with a corrugated metal roof stained dark with rust. One roll-up door facing the lot. The padlock on it was new, bright steel against weathered metal, like someone had replaced it recently. The key from Haskell's envelope fit. She could feel it in her palm, the teeth catching, ready to turn. But before she touched the lock, she saw the dog. A gray-muzzled shepherd mix lying on the concrete pad beside the roll-up door. One ear straight, the other folded forward at the tip. Lean but not starving. Calm amber eyes watching her without urgency, without fear, like it had been lying there a long time, like it had been waiting for exactly this. It didn't move. It didn't bark. It just watched. The dog didn't flinch when Nora crouched beside it, didn't whimper, didn't wag, didn't do any of that desperate "please love me" routine strays pull when they're starving for touch. It just lifted its graying muzzle, sniffed her outstretched hand once, one slow, deliberate inhale, like it was reading her whole biography off her skin, and then set its chin back down on its paws. Calm. Patient. Like it had been clocking her arrival on some internal schedule and she was right on time. One ear stood straight, the other folded forward at the tip. Amber eyes, steady as lantern glass. She didn't know why she said it. The name just fell out of her mouth like something she'd been carrying without realizing. Otto. She said it quietly, almost to herself, the way you test a word in a language you half remember. The dog's folded ear twitched. That was enough. Nora stood, grabbed the handle at the base of the roll-up door, and hauled it upward. The chain mechanism screamed, rust and seized bearings and years of nothing, but the door climbed. Cold air rolled out like breath from a cave. Inside, dead. That was the first impression. Dead fluorescent tubes running the length of the ceiling in long, parallel rows, all dark. Dead compressor units hunched along the left wall, their housings stained with oil that had crept and dried in slow geological layers. Industrial metal shelving stretched back into the dark in 5 long aisles, mostly bare, a few pallets of unlabeled wooden crates squatting on the lowest racks like they'd been forgotten mid-delivery and never claimed. The floor was poured concrete, cracked in places, and the smell hit her in layers. Old concrete dust first, then machine oil, then something underneath both of those. Faint, almost sweet. Cedar. Like someone had built something out of good wood in here once, and the ghost of it was still hanging around. She pulled out her phone. 41% battery. The flashlight cut a pale cone into the dark, and Otto walked past her into it without hesitation. Not exploring, navigating. His nails clicked on the concrete in a rhythm that said he'd walked these aisles 1,000 times. He turned left at the second row of shelving and disappeared into the shadows, and Nora followed because, honestly, the dog seemed to know more about this place than she did. The office was near the front, tucked into the right-hand corner behind a steel door that stood half open. Small, maybe 10 by 10. A metal desk with a vinyl chair pushed back from it at an angle, like someone had stood up and never come back to push it in. A rotary phone, black, the cord coiled in a perfect spiral. A wall calendar from a feed supply company, the kind with a photo of a tractor above the dates, stopped at March 2019. 5 years. 5 years this room had been sitting here holding its breath. Nora pulled open the desk drawer. A ring of unmarked keys, 7 of them, all different sizes, on a plain steel ring. A bank statement from Harwick Savings and Loan, creased from being folded in thirds. Balance of $1,406.33. And beneath both of those, face down, a Polaroid. She turned it over. A man in his 50s, flannel shirt, work boots, standing in front of this building with late afternoon light slanting across the roll-up door behind him. His arm rested around a gray and tan shepherd, younger, fuller in the chest, but the same darker saddle marking, the same one-up, one-folded ears, the same amber eyes. On the back, in pencil so soft it was almost gone, Otto and me, still here. Nora looked at the dog standing in the office doorway. Otto looked back. Neither of them said anything, which felt about right. She slid the Polaroid into her jacket pocket beside the dented brass compass on its braided cord and picked up the ring of keys. 3 blocks. That's how far she had to walk to find a living business. Pruitt's Hardware sat on the corner of Main and Depot like it had been planted there by someone who understood that every small town needs at least one place where the lights are always on and somebody knows where the 3/4-inch socket set is. The sign was hand-painted. The bell above the door actually worked. Dale Pruitt stood behind the counter like he'd been built with it. Stocky, barrel-chested, silver-white hair cropped close and combed straight back. Tortoiseshell half-moon reading glasses hung on a beaded chain against his burgundy flannel shirt with its pearl snap buttons. A worn black ballpoint pen was clipped to his breast pocket. He looked up from a parts catalog and waited. Didn't smile. Didn't not smile. Just waited the way a man waits who's been in the same spot long enough that he doesn't need to prove he belongs there. "I'm Martin Kellum's niece." Dale Pruitt went quiet. Not the kind of quiet where someone's thinking of what to say, the kind where the air in the room changes pressure. 3 full seconds. She counted. "He said you'd come." 4 words. 4 words that hit the floor like a cinder block. Before Nora could ask what that meant, Dale reached below the counter and set 2 things in front of her. A thermos, steel, dented, warm, and a sandwich wrapped in wax paper. He hadn't made these just now. He'd had them ready. She didn't ask how long. "Martin was a good man," Dale said, pale blue eyes steady behind those reading glasses he'd pushed up onto his forehead. Kept to himself, did his work, didn't bother anybody and didn't want to be bothered. "What did he store in the building?" "I never asked. He never said. That was the deal." He picked up his catalog again. Conversation closed. Nora took the thermos and the sandwich and walked back to the cold storage with Otto falling into step beside her, like a shadow that had finally found its owner again. She searched the building the way you search anything when you've got 41% battery and no overhead lights, methodically, aisle by aisle, sweeping the phone flashlight across every shelf and into every crate. Machine parts, engine components, boxes of bolts sorted by size into coffee cans, old gaskets, a pallet of copper fittings that might bring $30 at scrap. Nothing. Nothing that explained why a dead man's estate had bothered tracking her down. Nothing that justified the drive or the gas or the last of her checking account. The lawyer was right. This place was worthless. Then she reached the back wall. At the far end of the last aisle, past the final row of empty shelving, Nora's flashlight found something wrong. A section of cinder block that didn't match the rest. Newer mortar, cleaner lines, no condensation staining where the surrounding blocks wore decades of moisture like a skin. A patch job, deliberate, careful. Someone had sealed this section shut and wanted it to blend in, But time had done what time does and made the difference obvious to anyone stubborn enough to walk all the way to the back of a dead building with a dying phone. She put her ear close to the wall. A hum. Faint. Almost nothing. But something electrical was still running behind that cinder block, drawing power from somewhere, alive in the dark when everything else in this building had been dead for 5 years. Otto stood beside her and pressed his nose into the seam in the wall. His folded ear twitched once. He didn't move. Nora runs her fingers along the seam in the cinder block. The mortar is wrong. Smoother, lighter, applied by someone who knew what they were doing but couldn't perfectly match 40 years of mineral staining. She can feel it under her fingertips, a ridge where old meets new, and the electrical hum behind the wall is steady and low, the kind of sound you feel in your molars more than hear with your ears. She steps back, looks at the wall, looks at Otto, who hasn't moved, his graying muzzle still pressed against that seam like he's trying to tell her something he doesn't have the words for. Then she looks at the desk. The ring of keys is still sitting where she left it. 7 keys, unmarked, on a plain steel ring. She'd tried 3 of them on the front door, 1 on the supply cabinet. That leaves 3 she hasn't touched. Nora picks up the ring and walks back to the wall. She runs the flashlight beam slow across the cinder block, and this time she's not looking at the mortar. She's looking for hardware. The beam catches something at about waist height, a small steel plate, maybe 3 inches by 2, bolted flush with the wall and painted the same gray as the block around it. If you weren't looking for it, you'd never see it. Even looking for it, she almost missed it. The bolt heads are filled with matching gray paint. Someone wanted this to disappear. She crouches. There's a keyhole in the center of the plate, a recessed lock, the kind you'd find on a utility panel or a circuit box. Industrial, simple, built to last decades without maintenance. First key. Doesn't fit. Second key slides in but won't turn. Third key slides in. She twists it, and the lock turns with a gritty click that echoes off every concrete surface in that building, a sound like a knuckle cracking in a cathedral. Something mechanical releases inside the wall. A latch, heavy, the kind of thing you'd find on a walk-in freezer or a bank vault. And a section of wall that is not wall at all swings inward on heavy hinges. Let me say that again. A section of cinder block, 6 feet tall, 3 feet wide, painted and mortared to look exactly like the rest of the foundation wall, swings inward. Because it's not cinder block. It's a reinforced steel door, faced with a thin shell of concrete veneer, hung on hinges that somebody greased recently enough that they don't scream. Recently enough meaning sometime in the last 5, maybe 10 years. Somebody maintained this. Somebody came back. The air hits her first. Warmer, drier. A sealed environment, climate-controlled, and the difference is immediate, like stepping from a damp basement into a library. That electrical hum she'd been hearing makes sense now. Somewhere in the darkness ahead, a small dehumidifier unit is running off a separate circuit, doing the only job it was ever given, pulling moisture from the air around things that were never supposed to get wet. The smell comes second. Old paper. Not rotting, not mildewed, but old the way a bookshop is old, the way your grandmother's cedar chest smelled when you opened it at Thanksgiving. Cedar, yeah. And something else underneath, faint and almost sweet. Dried lavender. Somebody tucked sachets in here the way you'd protect a wool coat or a wedding dress. Somebody treated what's in this room the way you treat things you love. Nora's flashlight sweeps the space. 20 feet deep, maybe 30 feet wide. And full. Industrial shelving lines 3 walls, floor to ceiling, the heavy-duty steel kind you see in warehouses. And on every shelf, in neat rows, uniform cardboard document boxes. The kind you buy at an office supply store, the kind with a lid and a label slot on the front. Each one labeled. In the same precise handwriting, each one bears a year. 1971, 1972, 1973. Her flashlight tracks along the shelves. The years keep going. 1984, 1991, 2003, 2012, all the way to 2019. 48 years of something, boxed, labeled, preserved in climate-controlled darkness behind a hidden steel door in an abandoned gas station in a town most people can't find on a map. Along the fourth wall, 5 filing cabinets stand shoulder to shoulder. Gray metal, heavy gauge, the kind that would survive a fire. Each drawer is labeled with letter ranges in the same handwriting, A through D, E through H, all the way through the alphabet. And at the center of the room, like the heart of whatever this is, sits a heavy oak desk. Not a cheap one, the kind with dovetail joints and a leather writing surface, the kind that weighs 200 pounds and takes 4 men to move. A wooden chair is pushed in neatly, and on the desk, a green banker's lamp, the old-fashioned kind, brass base, green glass shade, is plugged into an outlet that runs off the same circuit as the dehumidifier. Nora reaches for the pull chain. Nothing. She pulls again. The bulb flickers on and fills the room with warm, amber light. And there, centered on the desk as though someone placed it there and then walked out knowing exactly who would find it, is a leather-bound ledger. Dark brown leather, cracked at the spine from use, thick as a family Bible. Embossed on the cover in gold letters that have dulled to a whisper, but are still perfectly legible, one word: Kellum. Have you ever held something in your hands that proved someone loved you before you even knew you needed it? Nora sits down in the wooden chair. The brass compass on its braided leather cord shifts against her thermal as she leans forward. Her hands are shaking, and she doesn't try to stop them. Otto walks in, calm, unhurried, his one straight ear and one folded ear silhouetted against the amber glow, and lies down beside the desk. His chin settles on his front paws. He doesn't circle, doesn't sniff. He lies down the way a dog lies down in a place he knows, beside a desk where he has rested 1,000 times before. Nora opens the first page. The handwriting is precise. Narrow, slanted slightly right, written with a fountain pen that left faint grooves in the paper. This is the record of what was given and why. If you are reading this, I am gone and you are the keeper now. Martin Kellum, begun January 1971. She turns the page. February 1971, Helen Grady, $200, heating oil, pipes frozen. April 1971, Douglas Monk, $340, transmission repair, cannot get to work. September 1971, Bess Calloway, $150, groceries 3 weeks. Nora turns another page. More names, more dates, more dollar amounts. No gaps, no blank months, no years skipped. The entries continue, steadily, precisely, without interruption, for 48 years. Nora sat at the oak desk and opened the ledger. The banker's lamp threw a warm amber circle across the page, and beyond that circle the room fell into deep shadow, shelving units rising into darkness, the filing cabinets standing like sentries along the walls, the faint chemical smell of old paper mixing with something else, something like cedar and dust, and the ghost of machine oil. Otto lay beside the desk with his chin on his paws, his amber eyes half closed, his graying muzzle pointed toward her boots as though he'd spent 1,000 nights exactly like this, waiting for someone to sit in that chair and do exactly what she was doing now. Her phone charged off the same circuit that powered the lamp. The little white cord snaked across the desk beside the ledger. She didn't check it. She didn't look at it once. She started reading. The first entry was dated March 14, 1976. A name, Doris Phelps. An amount, $47, 0. A purpose, heating oil, half tank. And then, in the same careful hand that had written her grandfather's name on the cover, a single note. Good woman. Husband left in March. The next entry, April 2, 1976. Carl Benning, $112.50. Car repair, alternator and labor. Then another. Then another. Nora turned the pages slowly, and the scope of what she was reading began to press against her chest like a hand laid flat. Medical bills, groceries, rent gaps. Martin had covered the difference between what someone could pay and what a landlord demanded, sometimes for months at a time. School supplies, dentures, a wheelchair for a man named Harold Voss, $340, purchased in 1988. Funeral costs. And here, Nora stopped and counted, tracing her finger down column after column, because Martin Kellum had paid for 14 funerals over the decades. 14 people who died with nothing, and Martin made sure they were buried with dignity. Each entry noted the same way: the name, the date, the amount, the purpose, and sometimes that single, quiet line of observation. 19 years old, nowhere to go, set her up in the Grady house. Or, boy's mother passed in September, bought him a coat and boots. Or simply, needed it. She read for 3 hours. The lamp hummed. The pages whispered under her fingertips, old and soft as cloth. Then she stood and opened the first filing cabinet. Inside, folders organized alphabetically, each one tabbed with a surname in Martin's handwriting. She pulled the first, Abbott, Jean, and found receipts, a canceled check made out to a pharmacy in Harwick for $62, a handwritten note on lined paper, and a photograph. A woman in a heavy coat standing outside a building Nora didn't recognize, squinting into winter light. Behind the photograph, a thank you card. The card was addressed to no one. "Dear friend," it read, "I don't know who you are, but you saved me this month. God bless you." The card was dated 1981. Nora opened another folder, another. The pattern held receipts, canceled checks, notes, sometimes a photograph, thank you cards addressed to an anonymous benefactor, people reaching into the dark to thank someone whose face they had never seen, whose name they had never learned. Martin Kellum had moved through Harwick for nearly 5 decades, like a current running beneath the surface, holding up houses and lives and futures, and nobody knew. Nobody knew because he never told them. Morning came. Light crept through the roll-up door she'd left half open the night before, gray and cold and carrying the smell of pine and old concrete. Nora was still reading when she heard footsteps, a knock on the metal frame of the door, not aggressive, almost polite. She looked up. Charcoal wool overcoat, fitted navy crewneck sweater underneath, pressed dark gray slacks and polished black Oxfords that had no business being anywhere near a cold storage facility in Harwick, Maine. Dark brown hair silvering at the temples, neatly side-parted, a shallow cleft in his chin, a thin gold signet ring on his right pinky, and tucked under his left arm, a slim black leather portfolio. Griffin Cole smiled like a man who had never been told no by anyone who mattered. He introduced himself warmly, developer from Portland. He'd been watching this property for 2 years, waiting for it to come to market. He'd heard about the tax auction, done his research, and he opened the portfolio, showing her printed documents she didn't reach for. He was prepared to offer $22,000, cash, enough to clear the outstanding taxes and leave Nora with almost $19,000. He said this number the way you'd offer a glass of water to someone dying of thirst, gently, with just enough pause to let the weight land. Then he leaned forward, the way he probably leaned toward every person he'd ever bought something from, and said, "I'm not trying to take anything from you. I'm trying to give you a way out." Son of a bitch probably practiced that line in the mirror. Nora looked at him, her gray-green eyes steady under straight dark brows, the loose strands of honey-blonde hair framing a face that hadn't slept. The dented brass compass on its braided leather cord caught the light where it hung against her thermal. She had $43. She had no home. She had no job. $19,000 was more money than she had ever held in her life, and Griffin Cole knew it, and he stood there smiling like he was doing her a favor. "The building is not for sale." 5 words, no heat, no waiver, just granite. Griffin's smile didn't falter. He nodded, set his card on the edge of the desk beside the lamp, and walked out. Otto watched him go without lifting his head. Nora turned back to the filing cabinets and kept counting. 312 names. 48 years. Martin Kellum had run the cold storage facility as a modest business. It barely broke even. But the business was never the point. The business was a shell. His real work was invisible. He lived on almost nothing so he could give almost everything away, and the proof was right here in these drawers, folder after folder after folder. The ledger's final entry was dated 11 days before his death. The handwriting was shakier but still precise, still deliberate, still Martin. Balance remaining, $1,406.33. It is enough. It was always enough. Nora stood there for a long time after she read that line. Then she pulled open the bottom drawer of the last filing cabinet. Most of the folders inside were thin. A few pages, a receipt, a note. But one folder was thicker than any other she'd found, thicker than any other in the entire room. It was manila, slightly worn at the edges, and labeled in Martin's handwriting in careful black ink. Kellum, Nora. Her hands started shaking before she'd even touched it. The brass compass shifted against her chest. Otto lifted his head from the floor and watched her, his one straight ear turning forward, his amber eyes steady and patient, as though he had been waiting for exactly this moment for a very long time. Nora sits on the cold concrete floor of the sealed room with the manila folder open across her knees. Otto presses his flank against her leg. The banker's lamp hums. Her fingers are not steady. They haven't been steady since she pulled this folder from the bottom drawer, since she saw her own name in Martin Kellum's careful block letters on the tab. Kellum, Nora. Thicker than any other folder in 4 filing cabinets spanning 48 years and 312 names. Thicker than any of them. And it was in the last drawer, in the back, like he'd put it where it would be hardest to find and hardest to miss. She opens it. The first document is a birth certificate, Commonwealth of Virginia. Nora Ellen Kellum, born March 14, 2002, at Harwick Community Hospital. Mother, Ellen Marie Kellum. Father, unknown. The paper is creased along the center fold, soft at the edges from being handled. Someone held this document many, many times. Someone unfolded it and read it and folded it back and put it away and then took it out again, over years, the way you return to a photograph of someone you can't reach. Beneath the birth certificate is a death certificate. Ellen Marie Kellum. Date of death, May 9, 2003. Cause, complications arising from bacterial pneumonia. Age at death, 24. Nora's mother was 24 years old, 14 months after Nora was born. And sitting on that cold concrete floor with Otto's ribs pressing slow and warm against her thigh, Nora learns for the first time in her life how her mother died. Nobody told her. Not the foster families, not the caseworkers, not the stepfather who threw her out with a garbage bag at 18. Nobody thought she needed to know. Or nobody thought she mattered enough to tell. Pneumonia. 24. 14 months. Under the death certificate, the folder changes. It becomes something else entirely. 22 envelopes. White, standard size, each one sealed. Each one addressed in Martin Kellum's handwriting. And here's the thing that makes the air leave the room. Every envelope is addressed to Nora at a different location. Addresses she lived at as a foster child. 1440 Drummond Lane, apartment 6B. That was the Hendersons, when she was 7. 88 Old Creek Road. That was the parish house, when she was 11. 302 Sycamore Court, Unit 14. She was 15 there. Martin Kellum tracked her. Across every move, every placement, every new zip code the state shuffled her to without a forwarding address, he found her. And he wrote to her every single year on her birthday. None of the envelopes were ever mailed. She opens the first one. A card with a simple floral design. Inside, in that same steady handwriting, "Happy birthday, Nora. You are 1 year old today. I hope this finds you someday. Uncle Martin." Tucked behind the card, a United States savings bond, $50, dated March 14, 2003. She opens the second. "Happy birthday, Nora. You are 2 years old today. I don't know where you are, but I know you're somewhere. England. Martin." Another bond, $50. The third, the fourth, the fifth. Each one with a bond, each one addressed to wherever she was living that year. Each one sealed and kept and never sent, Filed in this folder, in this cabinet, in this room he welded shut, behind a wall of steel lockers in a cold storage building, in a town she'd never heard of until a lawyer's letter found her 3 weeks ago. By the 10th card, the messages are longer. He's writing about Harwick, about the weather, about a dog, not Otto, an older one, a hound named Birch who liked to sleep under the desk, about a joke Dale Pruitt told him at the hardware store that wasn't funny, but he laughed anyway because Dale looked like he needed someone to laugh. By the 15th card, he's writing full paragraphs, telling her about the ice storm of 2017, about Mrs. Calloway's granddaughter getting into nursing school, about how the mountains look in October when the sourwoods turn. He wrote to her every year as though she were sitting across from him, as though she could hear him, as though the only thing separating them was a sheet of paper and a stamp he never licked. The 22nd card, the last one, dated this past March. Happy birthday, Nora. You are 22 today. I am not well, but I am not sorry. I did what I could with what I had. You deserved more and better, and I could not make them see that. I hope this finds you someday. I hope you know that someone tried. Uncle Martin. Below the cards, the court documents. 3 petitions for legal custody of Nora Kellum, minor child, filed in the Circuit Court of Harwick County, 2001, 2003, 2005. Each one denied. The language is bureaucratic and flat, and it lands like a fist. Petitioner is unmarried. Petitioner resides in a commercial property without adequate domestic arrangements. Petitioner's employment history is inconsistent. He lived here, in this building. He couldn't prove he had a proper home because his home was a cold storage facility where he also ran an invisible mutual aid fund for an entire town. He tried 3 times. 3 times a judge looked at a man who had quietly kept hundreds of families from falling apart and said, "Not good enough. Your floors are concrete. Your address is commercial. You are not what we consider suitable." Below the court documents, 1 photograph. A younger man, Martin, maybe late 40s, dark hair going gray at the temples, standing in front of the cold storage roll-up door. In his arms, a baby in a pale yellow blanket. The baby is looking up at him. He is looking at the camera, but his arms are wrapped around that child like he's holding the last warm thing left on earth. On the back, in handwriting shakier than any entry in the ledger, as if his hand could not keep still. The only time they let me hold her, I will not waste it. Nora presses the heel of her hand against her eyes, hard, harder, until the pressure steadies her. Her throat closes around something she can't swallow and can't spit out. Her body does what her voice will not. The dented brass compass on its braided cord shifts against her collarbone as her chest hitches once, then locks. She sits on that concrete floor for a long time. Otto does not move from her side. Every time she was told he didn't want you, every caseworker's careful explanation, every foster parent's secondhand shrug, every time the silence where a family should have been was explained away as nobody came forward, every single time was a lie. If you've made it this far, stay with me, because what happens next is the part I've been waiting to tell you. 3 days she didn't leave that building. 3 days. The cot Dale Pruitt carried in, without a word, without being asked, just appeared one afternoon with a wool blanket folded on top and a pillow that smelled faintly of cedar, sat wedged between 2 filing cabinets in the back corner of the sealed room. Nora slept on it in 2-hour stretches, waking to the amber glow of the banker's lamp she never turned off, Otto's slow breathing near the door, and the smell of old paper and linseed oil, and something beneath it all that was just cold concrete and time. She read everything, every cabinet, every folder, front to back. Dale left sandwiches on the desk in wax paper, ham and Swiss on Tuesday, turkey and mustard on Wednesday, roast beef on Thursday. She never saw him come in. She'd look up from a ledger page and the sandwich would be there, the wax paper slightly warm, a napkin tucked underneath with no note. She ate them one-handed, the other hand turning pages. And the bonds. God, the bonds. 22 of them. $50 face value each, purchased 1 per year, every year, from 1997 to 2019. She spread them across the oak desk in chronological order and just stared. The earliest ones, the ones from 97, 98, 99, had matured fully. The later ones were close. She did the math on the back of an envelope 3 times because she didn't believe the first two. $52,341. Nora Kellum, who had $34.22 in her checking account after gas and the one meal she'd allowed herself, a $4.75 bowl of chowder at the Harwick Diner, the cheapest hot thing on the menu, was sitting in a dead man's chair looking at more money than she had earned in her entire life combined. More money than she'd thought about in the abstract. The dented brass compass on its braided leather cord had slipped free of her thermal and hung forward as she leaned over the desk, catching lamplight, ticking faintly against the edge of a bond certificate dated 2004. The year she turned 4. The year Martin filed his second custody petition and a judge told him his domestic arrangements were inadequate. He bought her a bond that year anyway. $50 he probably couldn't spare. For a girl, a court wouldn't let him hold. Now, here's the scene I need you to stay with me for, because this is where it almost ended differently. 2 a.m. The banker's lamp is the only light in the building. Otto is asleep by the door, his gray muzzle resting on his paws, one ear folded forward, the other standing straight, twitching at sounds Nora can't hear. The filing cabinets throw long shadows across the concrete floor. 22 savings bonds are fanned across the desk like a hand of cards nobody taught her how to play. Griffin Cole's business card sits next to her phone. She picks it up, turns it over. The paper is heavy, creamy, embossed. Griffin Cole, Harborline Development Group. The number is real. The offer is real. $47,000 for the building and everything in it. She could clear the back taxes, cash the bonds, walk out of Harwick with $96,000 in change. More money than she'd earned in every job she'd ever worked, every dish she'd ever bussed, every floor she'd ever mopped, all of it stacked together and multiplied. Her thumb hovered over the number. The math was simple and it was brutal. $34.22 minus nothing, because there was nothing left to subtract. Gas to drive back to Portland would cost $28. That left $6.22. She was 3 days from being unable to leave this town. 3 days from calling a number she swore she'd never call, her stepfather's, the one who handed her a garbage bag and $34 and told her she was somebody else's problem now. The phone felt warm in her hand, the card felt cool between her fingers, and the building was silent except for Otto's breathing and the faint tick of the brass compass against her chest. Then she looked down. Tucked into the back of the ledger, the very last page, pressed flat against the inside of the rear cover where it could have stayed hidden for another 20 years, a sealed envelope, white, yellowed at the edges, her name on the front in handwriting she now recognized the way you recognize a voice you've only heard once but never forgot. Nora. Her hands shook, pulling it open, not from cold, from something that doesn't have a clean word. 2 pages, handwritten, blue ballpoint ink, the letters careful and slightly uneven, the handwriting of a man who built things with his hands and held a pen like it might break. He told her he knew she wouldn't understand why he lived this way. He said the money was never his. It belonged to Harwick, to the people who needed it when no one else was watching, and now it belonged to her. Not to spend, to continue. The building is yours, the ledger is yours, the work is yours if you want it. If you don't, sell it all and go live your life and I will understand. But if you stay, Nora, you will find that this place has a way of holding people up when the rest of the world lets them fall. He signed it, your uncle, who tried. She pressed the letter against her knees, and her forehead came down until it touched the paper, and she stayed like that for a long time. Otto lifted his head, watched, set it back down. Griffin Cole's card was still on the desk when he came back 3 days later. Same charcoal overcoat, same slim black leather portfolio under his left arm, same warm brown eyes, same shallow chin cleft, same easy lean forward like he was sharing a confidence with his closest friend. He'd done his homework. Estate filings are public record, and a man like Griffin Cole has people who read public records the way normal people read weather reports. Nora, I respect what your uncle did. He said it like he meant it. Maybe he did. But this building is falling apart. The compressors are shot. The roof has maybe 2 winters left. You can honor his memory and still be practical. $47,000. When she had 34, Nora held the stack of birthday cards in one hand. 22 cards, 22 years, 22 bonds a court said he wasn't adequate enough to deliver in person. The building is not for sale. Griffin's mouth tightened just slightly. You have $34. 5 words came back, quiet as stone. Those are my terms. She slid his card across the oak desk. Griffin Cole looked at it, looked at her. Gray-green eyes, steady, the loose strands of dark honey blonde framing a face that was done explaining itself. He picked up the card. He left. The door closed. Otto didn't move. Nora sat in the wooden chair. She reached for the black pen on the desk, the same pen Martin had used, the ink faded but not gone, and opened the ledger to the first blank page after his last entry. She wrote, Nora Kellum, continuing. Then she wrote the date. Word gets out in Harwick the way word gets out in any town that runs on coffee and memory, not through announcement but through accumulation. Dale Pruitt tells one person, that person tells 2. Within a week, people start showing up at the cold storage. First, one doesn't even knock. Nora finds a cord of firewood stacked tight against the east wall on a Tuesday morning, split clean and covered with a blue tarp weighted down by river stones. No note, no truck in the lot. She checks the ledger that night and finds it. Douglas Monk, 1971, $140 for heating fuel during the February ice storm. The man is in his 80s now. He drove here, stacked a cord of oak without a word, and drove home. That's all he needed to say. 2 days later, a woman in her 60s pulls up in a Honda with a casserole dish wrapped in tinfoil and a note taped to the lid. Helen Grady's daughter. The note reads, Mom never forgot, neither did I. She hands it to Nora at the bay door, presses Nora's hand once, just once, and gets back in her car. The casserole is still warm, chicken and rice with rosemary from somebody's garden. Otto sits at Nora's boots while she eats it standing up at the workbench, and she gives him the last bite because that's what you do when somebody shares a meal with you. A man in a Carhartt jacket shows up on Saturday, stands in the doorway with his hands in his pockets, and says 5 words before Nora can ask what he needs. Martin paid for my daughter's surgery in 2003, $3,200. I've been waiting to pay it forward. He leaves a check on the desk and walks out. The check is for $3,200, exact, not a penny more. Each one carries a sentence. Each sentence is a name from the ledger coming back to life. Now, here's the part I didn't see coming, and I don't think Nora did either. 3 weeks after she slid Griffin Cole's card across that desk and watched him walk out with his jaw tight and his slim black leather portfolio tucked under his left arm, a lumber delivery shows up at the cold storage. Grade A dimensional pine, enough to rebuild every shelf in the main bay. No invoice. No company name on the manifest. Just a delivery driver who shrugs and says somebody paid cash. Dale Pruitt, tortoiseshell reading glasses pushed up on his forehead, worn black ballpoint pen clipped to his burgundy flannel, tells Nora later that week he saw Griffin's truck at the lumber yard. Said it like he was mentioning the weather. Nora doesn't call to thank him. She doesn't need to. She uses the lumber. Every board. Weeks later, Griffin walks in. No overcoat this time. Sleeves of his navy crewneck pushed to his elbows, that thin gold signet ring catching the fluorescent light. He doesn't mention the lumber, doesn't scan the bay for his investment. He walks straight to the sealed room and stands in front of the open ledger. He reads. And he reads. And the room gets very, very quiet. His finger stops on a line. Cole, Robert, 1984, $600, truck repair, hauling business. His father. $600 that kept a truck running, that kept a family fed, that built a company, that built a man who came back here offering $47,000 to demolish the room he's standing in. Griffin sits on the concrete steps outside the building for a long time. Otto lies down near his feet, chin on his paws, one ear up and one folded forward, and doesn't move. When Griffin finally stands, his face has that cracked look. Not broken, just open somewhere it hadn't been open before. He says, "I didn't know." Nora leans against the doorframe, the dented brass compass shifting against the black thermal at her collarbone. Nobody did. That was the point. That line hits him harder than any refusal ever could. He nods once and walks to his truck. He doesn't look back. But he doesn't file another motion either. And the lumber stays. The savings bonds mature at $52,341. Nora cashes every one, walks into Harwick Savings and deposits the full amount under a new account name, Kellum Legacy Fund. She adds Martin's remaining balance, $1,406.33. Total, $53,747.33. She writes the first disbursement in the ledger that same afternoon, her handwriting careful and plain beneath decades of Martin's. Heating oil delivery, Pine Street, furnace replacement, $287. A woman whose name she learned from the post office and whose furnace died in January. If you've made it this far, stay with me, because this is the part I've been waiting to tell you. 18 months later, the cold storage is still standing. The roof is new. Donated labor, donated tin. The sealed room is now a lending library and archive, open to anyone who wants to read the ledger. Nora has added 41 new entries, 41 families, 41 quiet disbursements, heating oil, groceries, a car repair, school supplies, a deposit on an apartment, a dental bill. None of them asked where the money came from. None of them were told. Nora lives in the small office she's converted into a living space, a cot, a hot plate, a lamp. She works 3 days a week at Dale Pruitt's hardware store. She earns enough, not extra, enough. Otto sleeps by the desk, gray muzzle on his paws, amber eyes half open, watching the door like he's always watched the door. One evening, a car pulls into the gravel lot, a rusted Corolla with a cracked taillight and 194,000 miles on the odometer. The engine ticks as it cools. A young woman steps out, early 20s, duffel bag over one shoulder, the posture of someone who has been driving for hours toward something she isn't sure is real. She stands in the lot looking at the building like she's trying to decide if it's safe to hope. Nora walks out. Olive green jacket, loose strands of dark honey blonde framing her face. The brass compass on its braided cord catches the porch light. Otto follows, slow and deliberate, and sits at her boots. The young woman's voice is small and careful and almost breaks on the second word. "Someone told me, if I came here, there might be a room." Nora holds the door open. "You eat yet?" The legacy was never the building. It was never the bonds. It was never $53,747, 33 in a savings account, or 237 names in a ledger, or a sealed room behind a welded door. It was the act of holding a door open for someone who has been told every door is closed. Martin Kellum kept a promise no one asked him to keep, for a niece who never knew he was keeping it. Now she keeps it for strangers who will never know her name. The light is still on. The door is open.